can't imagine my mom ever writing poetry, and yet...
A poem for Gus.
A poem for Gus, who always said the wedding was a bad idea. Our father never hit us kids, at least not very hard, before the day my brother said with teenage disregard that he'd be dead before he'd see a wedding in our yard.
Okay, it's still kind of wordening. I guess I can just, if you can hear me if I'm back, then that's fine. Yeah, I mean, unless we want to invest into buying a ring light, this is about as good as it gets.
My father made him come, of course, but Gus stood far apart, just flew his kite and bottled up the storm inside his heart. I tried to talk him out of it, but though he'd never met her, "We don't need a stepmom," were the words that I remembered.
Husband and wife. Make him cry.
When the time for photos came, Dad ordered him to come here. But Gus declined, and as a sign held up his middle finger. The wind picked up, and panicked geese appeared and quickly went. But all the humans did that day was go inside the tent.
And a storm is coming. And he's flying high objects. Oh, there's the rest of them.
The rain came down in buckets then, but no one seemed afraid that nature might destroy the tent our dad had crudely made.
Oh no, so Dad doesn't care that his son is outside.
The thunder sounded much too close and full of angry power. But all my father said to this was, "Make the music louder." I wish that I could truly say I thought about you on that day. Out there on the beach alone, just you, the wind, the sea, and foam. But I didn't, until we found you.
She never talked about him, but Mom told me once if I was a boy, they were going to name me Gus.
Do you have a story when people were... Do you... Kulchina, do you have a story when people were walking in line and someone suddenly stopped walking and all the people bumped into each other? No idea what you're talking about. Probably not. Hey Crypto! Welcome to this very depressing stream. How old was Gus? 79. He was 13, right? How are you, Crypto? Raise flag. Breakfast, quiet time. Greg, be a baby. Aww. It's just like a really military dad, huh? Jump rope 100 times, jumping jacks 150, push-ups 100, crunches 100. Run to mailbox and back. Jesus Christ, dude, that seems a bit excessive. Strength. Yeah, need to see it. Strength, respect, and teamwork. Well, can't imagine why Gus wasn't exactly fond of his father. Honey, are you gonna?
My mom moved up to the loft after her brothers died.
You're 22 weeks pregnant. Why are you climbing a wall?
At the time, it was as far away as she could get.
I shouldn't get very far, huh? That's a nice room, though. Dawn and Sanjay.
She spent a summer building houses in Calcutta, where she met my dad, Sanjay. Religion was another thing my mom never talked about, but I think it helped her a lot after her dad died.
Probably. I'm guessing you can just skip some of the more upsetting stories. I'm sorry that I'm making you climb it again either.
My mom moved to India a week after graduation and got a job teaching English. Louis was born a year later.
Who's Louis? Louis is Edith's brother.
When my dad died, I don't think Mom knew where else to go. I'm sure Edie was happy to have her back.
Dawn had two brothers. Well, Dawn did have two brothers, but Edith has a brother Louis, who was the eldest, and then she was, and then Milton. It's kind of a nice garden. Louis was gardening, basil, sage, thyme, mint.
And to see kids in the house again.
Milton is just building something. And Edith was sort of attempting gardening.
The house had to get a little bigger, but Edie was used to that.
Yeah, that's another thing that kind of sticks with me, that Edith just doesn't like move on. That she just doesn't. It's not that she just keeps the past alive. She literally just never moved from the past. She left the... Instead of, you know, getting her family into the rooms that were already there, she's just like, let's build another room. Another room, and let's build just like another part of the house. Like there's no moving forward. Or there's still...
And for a while, things were good. Almost normal.
I think she said at the beginning that her mom sealed the rooms when she found Edith playing in them. So I think when they moved in, the rooms weren't sealed, but they were kept as mausoleums the way they were when the respective person died. Oh, Walter's room wasn't sealed because he moved into the basement before he died. Oh, that's a good point. I didn't realize that's why his room wasn't sealed. Homeschooled kids. Yeah. Louis rules. Our family history, fact or fiction. Analyze objectively, never stop learning, assume nothing, respect criticism, ask tough questions. Yeah, that's a good point. Dawn used to be a teacher, yeah.
But it didn't last.
It was normal, but it didn't last.
The beginning of the end was Milton's 10th birthday, when Edie gave him a castle. After Milton disappeared, the only thing he left behind was a room full of paintings.
I mean, to be fair, this is kind of a kid's dream, right? How far away from civilization were they? Like yes, there is town there, but you have to go through all there, I guess.
I think Edie was happy to finally have another painter in the family.
So 2 to 3 kilometers away, basically to Waterford Barrow. Yeah, like probably it's not that far by boat, but just clean some of the rooms. Look at that. That's not stable. It's very much above the trees. So the wind there must have been pretty crazy, but it also just doesn't look stable. I wonder what made them leave the house in such a hurry. Edie died. I think it's kind of sad in the end. Milton was a really good painter, though.
Milton Finch in The Magic Paintbrush.
Oh.
I was 4 when Milton disappeared.
Yeah, like Milton's disappearance is basically the one that's kind of like that looks supernatural, but also her red theories that he ran away, he got lost. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere. There's so many ways for a kid to just disappear and never be found. But I know that I think there is another, like, bit of a different game by the studio, and it's in, I think it's called the Unfinished Swan, something like that. And I think Milton, I read that Milton is like part of the game. So, but also he could have just like gotten lost somewhere. I think that he's like the only, that's sort of like that you could see like supernatural, but
Mom spent months searching for my brother. Then she sealed the doors.
I don't think there is anything supernatural behind any of this, really.
Whatever Milton had found in the house, Mom didn't want it getting out.
Like, it's quite possible that Milton realized how fucked up the family was, and something grieved him or something like that.
Mom definitely blamed Edie, but I think Lewis blamed himself. After he graduated, he just spent more and more time in his room. Until Mom got him a job at the cannery.
How old was he when he disappeared? Because I think the year is the disappearance, and she said that the things were normal until Milton disappeared, and he was 10 years old when Grandma gave him the castle. And yeah, so like 11.
Everyone always told me to stay out of Lewis's room. Except Lewis.
Oh, this is a nice chill place. Did they use part of the boat here? Interesting. I know you can open the window, but oh, you can't go up there. That's very unsafe. Yeah, it is. I mean, this entire structure is deeply unsafe, so you know, instead of cleaning the rooms that you keep as a mausoleum, we can just like a museum reminder of your dead family members, you just build a very unsafe structure on top of it.
Lewis's room smelled very, very familiar. That part of him lived on.
I would guess that. No, I don't want to go out. Nope. No. That was by accident. I think it would be so wasteful. I know. Especially because it's above trees, so it must have been really windy up here.
Lewis and I spent a lot of time playing games together, but he was surprisingly bad at them. He died a lot.
Imagine being a child living here, that would be wild. I mean, for a kid, I think this would be really awesome.
He was so proud of being Indian. I think for him, it was a way to be something other than just a Finch.
Oh, that's true, they were half Indian, right? Well, before I start reading this, I do want to... Okay, first I'm gonna finish my thought. I think that for a kid living in this house, especially with like all the crawl spaces and hidden floors and stuff, that would be probably really awesome. And like, and living what this is basically like a repurposed boat, right? How did they get it up here though? Okay, before I kind of open it, I want to give, this is the second part that I'm gonna give a warning that, apart from like the content warnings generally, Lewis's story contains, I would say, discussion of mental illness, implied suicide, and just like it's kind of like it's another one of those like very heavy parts of the story. So this is your warning. If you want to leave now, you can come back in a couple of minutes when I'm done.
Dear Mrs. Finch, as Lewis's psychiatrist, I can understand your desire for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse. Newly sober, I believe Lewis first noticed the monotony of his daily life. He kept working at the cannery, but he withdrew part of himself. In our sessions, I saw the same behavior.
Can we just put it there?
His mind began to wander.
Oh, this is so weird.
I asked him to describe it.
I'm using like literally both hands to do this. This is so wild.
He said he started small, imagining a labyrinth.
Like I'm using WASD to control the imagination and mouse to control the fish. That's wild.
He'd feel his way about. Then something moved. Bats. And toads.
My mouse is getting stuck. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not a good worker apparently. I'm getting piled with fish.
And things that have not names. He knew it was all in his head. But he took it very seriously. I had hoped he'd find himself. But he found something more. I worried about him then. Daydreaming at the cannery, I spoke with his boss. But he said Lewis had become a model employee. Methodical, tireless, focused. Like a whole new Lewis. So I let him go on. I even encouraged him. It seemed very promising at first. He told me he'd made a new friend.
I mean, he's pretty much listening. Also, have you noticed how the imagination, kind of the imaginary part, is taking more and more space on the screen? Like, he's getting more and more into it. It's getting fleshed out.
On the edge of a city he named Lewis Topia.
And he's getting more and more lost in his world.
He built the city up slowly, brick by brick. Then he made musicians. And songs for them to play. He talked about starting a band. And he was always humming something. Every day his imagination grew stronger. He no longer spoke at the cannery.
Where am I? Oh, look at the stuck in the corner.
But his chopping was as reliable as ever.
It's really weird because
Then
now
one day it struck him.
the way it's really well done is, I realized I was getting more and more focused really onto the fantasy, and also it takes now way less, more fantasy, and just like doing really automatically the fish chopping. That's really well done. And that was really creepy.
At all the cheering crowds, even the stones under his feet, were all in his imagination, so he could do whatever he wished. He held an election for mayor, and he won. They begged him to stay, but his mind was already wandering. It became a game for him. He'd conquer a city, then immediately push on. New Louisville. St. Louis.
St. Louis.
He started drifting away from our reality.
Yeah, I can just see it on the screen. It's really amazingly done.
Minneapolis. Until one day he forgot to go home from the cannery.
Oh, that's...
Even as his mother pleaded with him, part of Lewis kept sailing on.
Yeah, he's just...
In Lewisburg, he heard rumors of a...
I've already seen how the beautiful prince looks, so I'm kind of curious
Handsome
about
queen.
handsome queen story.
The queen was on her own quest for
Radiant rainbows.
radiant rainbows.
Come on.
He
follow.
followed the sound of her
Oh, he's trying to get her. Electric guitar. Oh, sitar.
electric sitar.
Oh, I forgot to chop it.
His chase led him to a golden palace east of the sun and west of the moon. Even then, his logic remained sound. He knew the world was all in his imagination.
It's not really even a canary now. It's just his.
But he was so proud of having created it.
He should have been a writer.
In his own eyes, he'd become something greater than a king. For someone who'd never known success in the real world, I think it was overwhelming. And then it struck him that the real Lewis was not the one chopping salmon, but the one climbing the steps of a golden palace. My imagination is as real as my body, he told me. It was hard to argue with him. He began to forget the world we know. I think it pained him to remember Lewis, the cannery worker. He began to despise the man with a royal contempt.
Yeah, he is just... Well...
I still thought I could save him. Even after he said he was being crowned king over all the lands of wonder. The palace would be packed with his companions.
It's kind of really hard that you have to control it.
Including the wise Calico who'd insisted on inviting him. His queen waited, holding his crown. There was only one thing left to do. bend down his head. And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
My brother was really cool. I wish you could have met him.
Yeah. That one was really kind of hard. On one hand, it was really amazing how it was done. Like, slowly you can see the imagination spreading, and the way you just control the fish chopping, it gets... After a while you just don't even realize it, you just focus on the imagination and you just do those things automatically, which I think is really well done. But this is really hard. Frankly, I think Lewis just needed... I would guess get out of the house, get out of the island. Because it's clear it was not doing him any good. And it's not clear if he intentionally, if he committed suicide, if he died by suicide, or if he was already just like so out of it that he just didn't realize what he was doing. I think my opinion is that he did kind of knew what was going on, but he just didn't care at that point, because the world in his head was much stronger and also much more important to him than the real world. He needed a better boss. That person was like, he's working, so not my problem. Yeah, that too as well. I would say also like a maybe better psychologist, because I think that was this was like a therapist, right? But I think he kind of needed some medication and probably some inpatient treatment or something, because
On the way back from Lewis's funeral, my mom told me to start packing.
more like intervention. Yeah, intervention, inpatient treatment, and just change of scenery, because I don't think, like, imagine living in this house that's part of memory of your dead relatives, with a grandma that's fixated on just death, and you're living here alone, just with your, even this, like, just with your sister and your mom and grandma.
She waited until the day before we left to tell Edie. I'm not sure if she wanted to make it easier or harder. I wish we'd stayed. But I understand why we left.
Like a really tiny kitchen. In loving memory, Edith Finch. December 27, 1988 to November 21, 2010. Beloved brother to Edith, son of Dawn, great grandson to Edie. he was danger to no one but himself, and they probably underestimated what was going on in his head. Yeah, but she knew that he was like losing grasp on reality, and she was like, "Oh, I thought I could save him." Like, yeah, maybe get him more help than you can give him. Like that kid had some serious mental health issues. He had substance abuse issues, and
My mom ended up leaving everything behind.
I'm sure it's a books to teach and to learn. 7 Ways to Create Fulfilling Classroom by Edith Finch. That's pretty cool.
What happened that night had been coming for a long time. Maybe it should have come sooner. But it had to end one way or another. All that's left now was to tell you about that last night. That whole last day, Edie just watched us pack and didn't say a word. Until supper, when she raised her glass and said,
"To our final night together, and all our final nights apart."
Grandma, you know what I said about alcohol. Some of your medications are very
Edith,
specific.
I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown-ups have to argue now.
I'm sorry, you're right. We're all leaving tomorrow. Let's just enjoy our last...
I'm not leaving.
Edith, you're excused.
the power had been shut off that morning, but Edie always had plenty of candles. When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance. Or that Edie had a key to it.
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house. Edith has a right to know these stories.
My children are dead because of your stories. I think it's best if Edith and I leave tonight. We'll have the nursing home send a van for you in the morning, okay?
Dear Edith, there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one. This is about what happened on the night you were born. That night, the tide went way, way out. It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground. There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean. They called it the lowest tide in 1,000 years. God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life. But I never thought I'd go back to it. When the fog rolled in, I lost my way. I got turned around. For a while, I wandered. I started seeing things. Things I'd forgotten had ever existed. But when I saw them, they felt like old friends. That night, a lot of things came back to me. Or maybe I came back to them. Things I can't explain, but that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it! Let go! I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car and... I never saw Great-Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the van came to pick her up, but she was already gone. After that, we moved around a lot. We both tried to make the best of it. A few years went by. My mom didn't like to talk about it, but she started getting sick a lot. The rest happened pretty quickly. She got better for a while, and then she didn't. And then I was alone. The last Finch left alive. Until I found out about you. I'm still not sure what to tell you about all this. If we lived forever, maybe we'd have time to understand things. But as it is, I think the best we can do is try to open our eyes. And appreciate how strange and brief all of this is. This journal was supposed to be for you. But now I hope you'll never see it. I just want to meet you and tell you all these stories myself. But I guess if you're reading this now, things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
Just gonna let the credits roll. Right. Is everything okay? Is everything okay?
Kind of. And you?
No, I'm fine. No, it's a really sad game.
Yes. You have an achievement.
Baby is good. Yeah, I think she died at childbirth, yeah.
It's kind of sad that it's like she knew about it.
Hmm. I like this photo. It's really cute childhood photos. Question? What question? This was a very depressing game. And it's depressing even if I knew what I was getting into. But I'm happy that I played it. I've wanted to play it for a while. Although I intentionally didn't watch any playthroughs or anything for a couple of years now, just so I can forget some stuff. And it gets heavy even if you know even if you know some of the stuff. You know, one thing I'm wondering also, while Lewis might have been struggling so much, is Dawn seems to be pretty religious, and based on his imagination, the fact that you can choose between prince and a princess or queen or whatever she was, I think he was struggling with sexuality. I think he was possibly bisexual, which probably would have been complicated to come to terms with because his mom was so deeply religious. I'm wondering how much of the curse is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because Edie was very set in keeping everything intact. The way it was keeping all the memories. Like, again, there's a difference between keeping a memory alive and grieving. Like, let's say you lose a child and you visit their grave every year. Like, I know that, for example, there's a way to keep the memory alive in a way that's also that just doesn't keep you stuck in it. I don't know, it seems to me that Edie was sort of obsessed with this curse. Like, it must have been really heavy to live in the house where there are reminders of all the dead relatives. Like, Dawn grew up in the house, and at the time Molly, Barbara, and Calvin were dead. You know, at the time I think those were Edith's siblings, right? Or children. No, those are her children. Right. So at the time, Dawn's grandparents, like, they were dead. And she grew up in a house where the memory was just kept alive. In a very, I would say, kind of morbid is what I'm trying to say. Like, it looks beautiful and everything, but it is very morbid and it is very heavy. And then she lost her two brothers, and no, it doesn't seem like anybody in this family actually processes anything. That there's a lot of generational trauma that keeps getting piled on by tragedy, but a lot of these things can be really like self-fulfilling prophecy. When you don't address trauma, you don't address mental health problems, you don't address the dysfunction, and it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, and it keeps destroying everything in its way. That's why I find this game so fascinating, because, like the title of the stream, it is a very beautifully painted dysfunction. It's amazing. The rooms are so beautiful. The house is so fascinating. And the entire game itself is like really pretty. But it's dysfunctional on so many different levels. And there's like so many unaddressed trauma, so many like unaddressed grief. Yeah. Like with Walter, he's maybe it's not a good idea to not help your kid get some mental health help, which I'm guessing at the time it probably wasn't much of a thing back then, but maybe just let him move out of the house, send him to relatives, or just move away from the house itself. It's an amazing house, but maybe that would help your child to be less traumatized, you know? Instead of keeping all these memories in a very damaging way alive. There's, you know, it feels... Not to mention that, like, Edie Edie seems... There's not much talk about Sven as a father, but Edie seems like a very... neglectful mother. Because... she sent Molly... Well, Molly was locked in her room without food. Which... Look, as much as a child misbehaves, it's just like keeping them hungry, that's abuse. You know, with Barbara, there probably wasn't much that she could have done, because Sven got hurt and stuff. But then keeping specifically that one comic as a reminder. Right, yeah, right, Edith. Yeah, I think I read some theory that possibly Edie was the one who sort of fed the story to the comic book that's in the room. But how to say? And with Calvin, like we talked, like you don't put a swing above a cliff. Like, that's just, I don't know, common sense.